Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online PTS video with me, Sherman. Today guys, I'm just gonna tell you guys about what I've been doing, why I haven't put out any videos last week. A lot of it came down to the fact that when I tried creating the videos I was wanting to do, I started running into problems. And not just problems with video, but also my allergies kicked in, so that didn't help. And then on top of that, trying to get the videos out in the way I was trying to do it didn't work. And a lot of that comes down to certain things. So let me explain what I've known, but what I wasn't taking into consideration. And that is class identity. A lot of people don't take class identity seriously in this game a lot of times because of the fact that they don't see how it works. They don't see how it applies to certain things. Now, people who know the meta and people who know know builds and know classes know that there's class identity. They know very well that it's there. And I'll even call out a few people here. Asian God has pointed out many times in his videos when he's talking about DPS rotations and DPS, in that fact that, like, when you make a build with this gear type, with these certain gear sets, and you play it with this class, this class, this class, and this class, and these races even, like, it's going to make a difference. Like, everything's going to make a difference when it comes to min-maxing. And that's because, one, class identity plays a lot in how classes play. I mean, take, for example, the DK. The DK is, and even the Sork, are both designed to be AoE powerhouses. But the DK is more in the fire department because of its own design, is powerful with fire and poison damage. Dot damage. It is really powerful with dot damage. In fact, it is the most powerful class in the game for it, but only to a certain degree. The Sork is literally hands down the best AoE dot damage build in the game. Like, you can't beat it. The reason for that is because the way Sork can take advantage of the lightning damage. And it plays also into tanking and tanking with different weapon types and all that. So I could show you how to make play a bow tank, but I'd have to show you with every class individually, because every class is going to play tanking differently. And some classes are going to be better with some sets over others when it comes to different roles, like tanking and healing and damage dealing. And that's because some classes can take advantage of stuff better than other classes. And that's where a lot of people, I think, misinterpret the idea of play how you want versus let's make the most organized min-max group to give us the best result. Because in order to do that, in order to min-max your group, in order to organize your group, you have to test every combination. And there's a reason why the meta sticks to the meta. They don't change, they don't deviate, because they know it. They know it really well. They know how every skill in the game works, from, through all the different classes. They know how to take advantage of those things in such a way that it works. But when they try to incorporate other classes into certain roles, it doesn't fit into their group dynamic. And there's a reason why it doesn't fit in their group dynamic. The class identity separates it. It's one of the reasons why Nightblades have never been part of the meta when it comes to healers, or even Sorks for that matter, for a long time. And that's because of the fact of how they play. Now that people are starting to see how the game's meant to be played. Like, you can play how you want. You can really play a Sork healer if you want to, and they're really good, but you can't play it the same way you do a Templar. or the way you do a Nightblade, or the way you do a Necro. You can try using the same, build structure, but it's not going to give you the same advantage. And that's because their skills are different. Their active skills, their passive skills are different from somebody else's. And that's why a lot of people went to using Sorks, was they had a higher uptime of keeping off balance, because most of their abilities are lightning damage based, and they excel with lightning damage. So yeah, why wouldn't you? But that's the point. Like, building to the advantage of your character is what makes you a better player. And it's one of the things that I've noticed many a times when I've been working on builds, and I created when I created the first two-handed tank, my first two-handed tank, it was on a DK, and it was good, but it lacked certain tools for me. So when I did it with the Templar, and I started to see the effect that the Templar had with two-handed playstyle, and its effectiveness with two-handed tanking, I realized that the Templar was the better of the two. Not just mathematically, but playability with that role. Just like when I play a DK with a sword and shield, or I play a Warden with a sword and shield tanking, hands down I like the DK better, because it plays so well into sword and shield tanking than the Warden does. Now, you give me a Warden with an ice staff, I will tank the snot out of stuff, and I'll love doing it because it works really good with it. And that's the point. Like, the game is designed for you to pick the class that fits your playstyle and your player identity, your own player identity, like the way you like to play. Do you want to be that stealthy poison character that goes around and just applies a bunch of poison to people? Play a DK, because most of their skills derive to poison. If you want to play something that's more dedicated to high burst damage, play a Nightblade. You want to play something that's kind of a mix of the two? Play a Warden. Play a Necromancer. Play a Templar. Because they fit into all those different categories. That's why when you see people make DPS builds, you'll see that, like, oh, the Templar's doing really good right now, and that's because it's complemented not by the way that they built it or the skills they chose, but by the sets, the traits, the enchants. It's the whole entire build itself and how it plays into that class. Because that class has active skills and passive skills that play into that play style a little better. And it's not that not every class can play that way. Like when it comes to, like I said, DPS. If you look at the different weapon types and you do that, and then you look at each of the class types, like literally each class type takes advantage of different weapons in different ways. So, let's look at Twin Blade and Blunt. What does it do? So, for one, you have each axe gives 8% chance to apply a dot to the enemies over 6 seconds. Well, guess what? Try that on a DK and see how it turns out. Because I can promise you, you're going to see greater damage over time and more effective damage over time. The same thing applies to a sword. Give them a two-handed axe or dual axe, they're great. But you put it on a Nightblade and you don't get the same effect. Why is that? Well, that's because the Nightblade takes advantage from high crit, high burst damage. And that's where the daggers come into play. What about swords? Swords increase your overall damage by 3%. Swords actually play best on Templars. Templars, Wardens, and Necromancers. Why? Because of that fact. Now, they also play really good on Sorks. And that's because Sorks get the 5% increase to physical damage. Well, when you apply that to this extra 6% you're going to get from dual wield and extra 6% you get from two-handed, on any damage you deal gets increased by 6%. It amplifies their capabilities. And that's the things you got to look at when it comes to different things. And then somebody's going to say, well, what about maces? Maces work on anybody, but they really work good or best on necromancers and Templars. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because of the fact that necromancers don't get any advantage, like any kind of advantage, but giving them extra penetration allows them to build for greater damage output overall. So they can build for crit and weapon damage, and then have that extra 20% penetration. Or extra 10% penetration. Either way, they can go a sword and a mace, and it makes them really good. Same thing applies to a Templar. Makes them really good because of this. Now, where it excels with the Templar and swords, what I was meaning by that is the Adric Spear ability, balanced weapons. And this because this one increases your weapon damage by 6%. So when you take that into account and you add it to that 6% weapon damage, or that extra 6% damage you get across the board, this applies to weapon damage. That applies to everything. So that means your jabs are going to get 12% increase in damage. And that's 6% from weapon damage, like your weapon damage increase gets increased by 6%, and then an extra 6% from the damage it does itself, because of the dual wield passive. So when you take all that stuff into consideration, some weapons are better on different classes for these purposes. Like, Nightblades are really good with dual wield of any kind, but they excel with daggers. Templars are good with all the dual wield of any kind, but they excel with swords and maces. The same thing with necromancers. And I think the reason why the necromancer and the Templar are so close is because they don't get any other real group benefits besides they get minor magicka. That's just about it. They don't get anything that applies to physical damage to the group. So those things allow them to get that little bit of extra out of themselves for that purpose. And it's one of those things that when you look at every aspect of a class and you look at every aspect of the skills and you intertwine them, you start to see why they work so good. Like, why does DK work so good with dots? Well, it's because of a lot of the skills they have. Noxious Breath, that kind of stuff that does, or Burning Fire Breath, whatever. It really works good for AoE damage, like area of effect damage. They're really good at that. They're really good for damage over time because their skills are built for that. So when you give them a way of increasing that damage over time, and you give them the tools to increase their damage over time, they actually become more powerful. Because that means they're going to kill things faster because they can apply this damage over time. Now, what about Sorks? Well, Sorks are, like I said, they're the kings of AoE. Area of effect. You give them the tools to play area of effect damage, they actually excel at it versus anyone else. And that's because the class is designed to work that way. The class is designed to work for area of effect. So there's a lot of things that you got to look at when it comes to how you play and your role and all that. So, like, when somebody asks me, why do you play, why does this ice tank work so good for you? Well, it's because of the fact that, one, it's a warden, and I can take advantage of the ice staff 100%. And then when you take that into account with the way the warden tanks with the ice, they literally excel with it. And that's what makes them so powerful with the ice staff tanking. is they plays off each other in that sense. And the same thing here with two-handed tanking and the Templar. It works really good on the Templar because of the Templar's passives and active skills. Plays into two-handed tanking much better than any other class. Now, it's not that it's like that much better, it's just better mathematically. Like if you were going to min-max or meta it, that's what it would come out to. Two-handed tanking on the DK now is almost on par, minus the fact that it doesn't have that 6% consistent weapon damage uptime. They do have a way of increasing weapon damage for the group, which is good, but also I wouldn't say it's a positive as much as I would say it's a negative. And that's where the DK kind of falters. Now the DK can block extra damage, which makes them a little better in that regard, but they don't have the shield capacity that the Templar does. Or yeah, the Templar does. The only one that does is the Sork. And then the Sork is good at tanking with two-handed, but they don't gain that benefit. So there's certain things that play into the capabilities that the Sork just doesn't have, but they can do it good. Just like the Nightblade can do it good, but it's still lacking certain tools. And it's one of the reasons why you see skills broken up the way we do. Like in Undaunted skill line, we see Spike Bone Shield here. This is so you can do the shield stacking. And that's a really effective way of tanking, especially now with the changes to the way shields work and the fact that they're based off of resistances now. So your shield strength is actually affected by your resistance level. So when you see this character and I do my resistance buff, I have 27k physical, 28k spell, and then when I have both my shields up, both of them have this 28k pretty much resistance. So that really plays into that concept. So the thing that I started to realize when I was doing those videos last week, or started working on the videos last week, was that all that stuff I just talked about. Like, how do I tell you how to two-handed tank if I don't tell you how to do it with each class? Like, I cannot do that. I cannot sit here and say, this is how you two-handed tank, and then say, now go do it with every class. Like, I can't do that. It just goes against my nature of who I am and what I'm trying to do with my channel and helping you guys understand how you can play the game. So, what I've realized is I do have to make builds. And I don't mind making builds. I love making builds. In fact, I love it more than anything else in this game because of the fact that there's so much versatility in this game when it comes to ways to play. And it's one of the reasons why I do like playing this game so much, is you have so much versatility in how you can create a character. From a light armor tank running a resto staff, or being a resto staff tank, to a medium armor tank running a sword and shield and fire staff on a DK, to a heavy armor tank running a two-handed sword and a bow. Like, there's so many different ways that you can play the game and effectively tank, effectively heal, and effectively do damage that you don't really need certain tools. Like when people say, oh, well, you can't be a healer if you're not using combat prayer. No, I can be a healer without combat prayer. If you need combat prayer in your group, that's part of your group dynamic. And I understand that. But you have to understand, not everyone's going to have that skill. Especially when people find out that they can play a healer without a resto staff. And they can do it with every class in the game, including Dragon Knight. And people will go, what? Like, I can play healer as a Dragon Knight without using a resto staff? I want to know how. And it's one of those things that as time has progressed, they've added more and more tools to allow you to do that and to be more effective with that. So you can find the way you want to play, how you want to play. Because that's what this game is truly about. And a lot of people don't grasp that idea that this game is about playing how you want, finding your own identity with your character, and then mastering that identity, mastering that playstyle, mastering that that stuff. And like I said, is this the perfect tank build for a Templar? Probably not. I'm sure somebody can come up with something better. But when you're looking at how to tank with the two-handed, and you're looking at how you need to get your stats set up, how much health you need, how much stamina you need, how much recovery you need, how much this and this and this, because all the things in this game play into how well you can do that role, play that role capably, based on those things. Like, how good are you at tanking, health wise? Like, are you a good tank with low health, or do you need that blanket? Do you need that cushion of extra health? Because if you need that cushion, they give you the tools to do that. You just have to sacrifice something to get that higher health, and you're going to sacrifice another stat to do it. Now, I did the opposite. I sacrificed my health to make my tank better by increasing other stats. And that's how I get away with tanking, is I built the build, and I compensated certain things for that. And I do apologize for coughing constantly. If you guys don't think I don't have a drink here, I do. I've been drinking this whole time. It's just my allergies are starting to get bad again. And I'm trying to get this video out for you guys. But enough of that. So back to the subject at hand. This is what I learned over the last week, and it's really hard to try and put out a guide to something, because I could do like some people and say, okay, here's how you do a rotation, a DPS rotation with dual wield and a bow, and then that's what I could do. But I couldn't show you, like, it still wouldn't pertain to how to do it effectively with every class, like, because even though you could use like a lot of the similar skills and tools that you use on another thing, like gear and traits and enchants and all that, it's still the skills that it has active readily available, and the passives that separate it from the other classes, and again creates this diversity that not every class is made to do everything perfectly, but instead is made to do a mix of things really good and everything else just good. It's kind of like we're jacks of all trades and masters of none, unless you specialize. And then once you start specializing into that play style, kind of like two-handed tanking, when you start specializing into two-handed tanking, you start figuring it out, and you see how it works with every class individually, you start to see that difference. It's the same thing with like light armor tanking, heavy armor tanking, and medium armor tanking. It's taking advantage of the different aspects of the armor type and how you can use it to your advantage as a tank. The same thing applies to the weapons, to your role. Like, if you're going to play DPS, what do? You build for damage, right? You put as much as you can into your primary stat, you put as much as you can into your primary damage, and then the rest you kind of fill in the blanks with other things to compensate. So you're not lacking health, or you're not lacking your recovery, or you're not lacking your resource management, that kind of stuff. Like, you gotta build for all that stuff in such a way, and again, you can even see this in the meta. If you look close enough, you'll see, like, okay, this race has a better chance of, or a better ability to sustain because of their passive, their racial passive. Even though this elf, like if you look at the wood elf and the red garden and the orc, in comparison, damage wise, the orc is going to stand out because of the extra weapon damage and the extra stamina, where the wood elf is going to stand out because of the extra recovery. And the same thing applies to the red guard. Like, they're going to get that high stamina stuff, but they also get that resource management that no other race gets. So there's a few things that play into that. But if you're going mathematically and you test it, the orc will excel where those other two classes won't. Those other two races won't. The same thing applies to classes as well. Like, some races with certain classes excel over others, just like they do in certain roles. And it's because of the game's design. Are you always going to have the perfect character? No. Never. Why? Because the game doesn't allow us to have perfect. It allows us to have what the game allows us to have, which is restrictions based on how much we can have in stats, how much we can have in weapon damage, spell damage, traits, what, all these different things are restrictions that keep our power to a certain level. So we can't be too overpowered. And when people talk about like how DPS is growing all this time, people are doing 100k and all this kind of stuff, there's a reason why people are doing 100k now. And it's because of the tools that we've been given. And it's the tools that the devs have given us that allows those damage numbers to appear like that. But they only appear in one place. Unfortunately, I have done this test thoroughly, and I can tell you it only happens on that target dummy, and with a really good rotation, a really good build setup, will you see those numbers. In a dungeon or a trial, you're not going to see that. You won't see 150k DPS or 120k DPS. You're going to be lucky if you get 80k or 90k DPS in some cases. And that's because of the active-reactive combat system we have in this game. Because of the action combat. We have to dodge roll, we have to block, we have to do certain things to avoid damage. And you can't just stand there and deal damage and take damage at the same time, unfortunately, because the game doesn't allow it. Now, there are some skills that allow you to absorb some damage, but again, not enough to do that consistently. So when I hear people say, oh, I can do 116k DPS, yeah, on a target dummy, now go into a dungeon, because you're not going to do that. There will be times where you'll get close, and then it'll falter off because of dodge rolling, blocking, all that stuff. Because you're not having to do that on a target dummy. You're just standing there doing your perfect rotation in a controlled situation. So, but yeah, I mean, like I said, I've done a lot of testing in this game, and I've played a lot of different things. And there's a certain play style I have. I love tanking, and it's my favorite role. I also like to play healers, and I like to play damage dealers and stuff, but not as much as I do tanking. And it's one of the reasons why I found myself testing so many different ways to tank, was because of that particular thing. I saw the advantages of tanking with different tools in the game, and I learned, trained myself how to do most of it because of the fact there was no guides for it. Nobody told me how to two-handed tank. I had to figure it out. Nobody told me how to resto staff tank. Nobody told me how to bow tank. I had to figure all that stuff out. And when I found certain classes were better at it, I never put the class identity thing into it until later down the road when I started to notice more and more how much, how different classes were. But again, it's one of those things. Class identity is super important that we have it in the game. It's super important that we have weapon identity. It's super important we have armor identity. It's super important we have race identity. It's because it creates these differences, and it's such subtle differences that it makes the gameplay experience so much different no matter what you play. Like playing an Argonian Stamina DK versus an Argonian Magicka DK. They play differently. And I can tell you that the Magicka one will do a little bit more damage and a little bit more support because of their natural healing capabilities. But I really love playing an Argonian Stamina DK. Because of the fact it kind of fits the race, having the ability to spit poison out and do all this other stuff just really plays well. And I don't know why. It just does. And maybe it's just a preference of play. but I really enjoy it. It's just like with my orc sorcerer. I really enjoy it because it's kind of like playing a shaman, because I play a hybrid, and I play him as a support character, more of a healer support character kind of thing. But I can tank with him, I can do damage with him, and I can heal with him. But I'm geared towards healing more than I am anything else, and I really love, again, I love that playstyle. I love that flexibility in the way that character works. Kind of like my Tempest Barbarian. I really like that. And I do have, every time I talk about Tempest Barbarian, I have to give Killer Mac a shout out, because if it wasn't for him showing me that his Tesla tank, I would have never created the Tempest tank, the Tempest Barbarian tank. And that's because of how effective it really is in that setup, in that role. And the amount of damage you can mitigate and the way it tanks is so much fun. But that's it for the video, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, you guys know what's coming next. Go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. And also remember, when you do subscribe, to click that notification bell. Not only does that help my channel grow, it also allows you to see when my channel, or when I post new videos. And it helps with this algorithm problem some people have been having with finding videos on people. So, and that's it. So, as always, thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day. And this guy might see you in game. Bye.